Morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. Welcome to the session on the IDFC and GCF cooperation. My name is Vikram Wij. I'm the Senior Advisor for Climate Finance at the Climate Policy Initiative. I've been with them for about 3 years. Prior to that, I was with the International Finance Corporation for 25 years doing climate finance. So I'm reasonably familiar with both the organizations and coalitions here that we are going to talk about. IDFC, which has 27 members behind you on the chart with their logos, has actually committed to mobilizing $1 trillion by 2025. They've published a best practice study on Paris alignment. Some of the IDFC members have already accomplished that. Many are en route to doing that. They have set up a climate finance facility to support the capacity building between members, and they have signed a partnership with the Green Climate Fund to improve access for national development banks and mobilize several individual commitments by its members to phase out coal financing. One of the things that my organization helps IDFC with is conducting an annual mapping of how its member institutions are doing vis-a-vis contributing to green finance. And I'm happy to sort of report that as of the last report from 2021, IDFC members have committed $224 billion to this effort, representing a 21% increase compared to the year before. And thanks to the climate facility, IDFC members have benefited from different support along the year, fostering the Paris alignment, as well as other sort of capacity building. Personally, if I can end on a note, I think IDFC members, national development banks and others, are absolutely perfectly positioned in today's world to actually channel some of this famed money that we know is floating around in the global savings system. It needs to ultimately make it to the countries. We know there are risks. We know the cost of capital is high, but the national development banks and other IDFC members are uniquely situated, given their position within the sovereign framework and the financial sector, to help deliver by aggregating, de-risking, and I do believe the GCF can play a significant role in helping get that accomplished. With that, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce to you today Remy Roux, who is the CEO of AFD since 2016 and also the chairman and president of the Finance in Common movement, as also the chairman of IDFC, right? Exactly. So, and Henry Gonzalez, who is the GCF's deputy executive director and has over 25 years of experience across sustainable impact investing, emerging markets, of course, as well as political economic development. It is my pleasure to have you both. Remy, if you will please, and then Henry, give us some remarks. They will both sign a MOU after that to extend the existing relationship, and then we'll proceed with the rest of the panel. Thank you all for your attention.
Thanks a lot, Vikram, and good morning, everybody. It's a great pleasure to start this Finance Day here at COP27 on the IDFC Pavilion with Henry. I know Yannick Glemarek is trapped somewhere in another meeting, but he told me, and certainly Henry will convey as well, his wishes for a fruitful partnership renewed between the Green Climate Fund and IDFC. The figures you referred to, Vikram, demonstrate our willingness, commitment to the fight against climate change, our collective commitment. We already provided $1.2 trillion since COP21. We pledged for 1.3 more between 2019 and 2025. And we reached our highest mark in 2021, yes, 224, which with what MDBs are originating makes more than $300 billion climate finance last year. So a way to, of course, we will have to discuss what climate finance is post 2025, what the 100 billion of Copenhagen will become. It has to be, of course, met. But we are in this group preparing a next phase from day one in terms of ambition, in terms of cooperation, and as you know it, the Finance in Common movement, which gathered in Abidjan 2 weeks ago, starts from IDFC. Of course, opening our arms, cooperating with the whole community of the 500 plus public development banks in the world. And I see this signal, this message gaining ground, of course, to help the negotiators here, to help the parties move forward. And I want to stress that nothing would have been possible without the Green Climate Fund. Of course, because, Henry, because of your strategy, Climate Fund has been framed from the start as a new fund that is open for as many entities as possible. So it's really based on direct access, which resonates so strong in the discussions here. Of course, I know you are defining your new strategy right now, and certainly you will give us the flavor of it, and we stand ready, of course, to do more. Nothing would have been possible without, well, GCF funding for IDFC members. As you know it, we have 15 accredited members, so it's really a lighthouse for the whole community of public banks, where we're all turning to youth. Somehow this is the only pocket of international finance we have direct access to. So 15 members out of 27 being accredited, 11 direct access entities. And we have already 8 of us that have, well, the money is flowing from the GCF to our public banks. It makes 2.2 billion US dollar from the GCF mobilized by IDFC members out of 28 funding proposals. So it's becoming really significant, and certainly we want to be at the heart of your next strategy. We contributed collectively to address key messages for this new strategy, and we will continue to reinforce the Green Climate Fund signal in the new architecture, financial architecture that is now being discussed, in DC for the annual meetings of the IMF and the World Bank, on the sidelines, and during the negotiation here at COP 27, and next year at the next Finance in Common Summit. We certainly hope that a more inclusive, a more ambitious architecture will structure itself so that it can host the loss and damage dimension, it can host adaptation, it can host biodiversity, on top of what we are already doing significantly for mitigation. So maybe I'll stop here. Of course, thanking the other CEOs in the room, Soumaïla and Patrick before me, Javier also. They will give us their experience on what it means very concretely to do climate projects. Of course, we are in Sharm el-Sheikh, so with a strong focus on African needs and African institutions that we trust, that are members of the IDFC, and that are doing a fantastic job for the JETP scheme in South Africa and all over the place for sustainable infrastructure in Africa. Thanks a lot.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Remy, and thank you, Vikram, for allowing me to be here with
years, and I would say family, because this partnership at the IDFC is a partnership that is really close to what GCF does. We have 35 public institutions in our accredited system, out of which we are working with 15 from this network. And as Remy said, we have already about 28 funding proposals have already been approved. And the amount of 2 billion that Remy mentioned is just the commitment of GCF. We take into account co-financing that goes to around 7.2 billion. So there is a lot of opportunity to use our limited capital in crowding in other investors. One important element is the collaboration and the cross-fertilization of experiences. Because I also think that this network provides that opportunity of creating a hub of climate finance that we can learn from one another. And I think we would like to continue with our partnership in order to strengthen that collaboration. You need to switch mics? Well, I'm loud. I'm from Latin America. I don't think I need this. Okay, is it okay? Okay. Can you hear me there in the back? For the record. Because I always feel that I scream when I have a mic. I'm already loud. So apologies for that. One thing that is really important is this year in 2022 in Antigua, we held a board meeting and we approved the private sector strategy. And one of our 4 prongs of that strategy is greening the local financial system. And I think that when we really want to achieve that objective, it is the banks, the development banks, those working with microfinance and small and medium enterprises, they were able to support it. So I think the alliance and our goals are extremely embedded. Now, we are closing our programming cycle and we're launching a replenishment for GCF2. And we would need all your support to make a very unique voice that we need a more ambitious and a more daring replenishment for GCF2. We need collaboration from the developed countries, but also from developing countries. Some of you here, your countries have also contributed. So our contribution is open to all, but of course it is those that are indeed aligned to providing the funding in the developed world that we count, hopefully for them to be more ambitious with that. The local aspects, climate action is local by its nature. So having those close to those impacted are very important. GCF is a partnership hub. We don't do direct investments. We rely on our accredited entities. We hope that our board is going to approve an enhanced accreditation strategy that would make it easier, because I know it's not easy. So I already acknowledge that we have to improve certain things internally, but I believe that we have already able to show a lot of what can be done together. One other element is that the majority of the entities are direct access entities, and this is going to become a more important element. Having said this, international access entities like IFD or KfW or others work very closely with direct access entities and could also work together in bringing transactions where a direct access entity could be an executing entity and allow them to learn how some of our methods work. So there's also a lot of potential synergies between international and direct, because both should coexist, but there's going to be a stronger accent on direct access entities. So our goal in signing this partnership today is indeed to look at how we continue working together towards GCF2, which is our new strategy that we're going to be launching and approving at the board next year, and is going to cover the years from 2024 to 2027. So we are aligned. It is indeed the financial institutions that would be able to move from billions to trillions. Already Remy mentioned that you have already mobilized resources in the trillions. We're still in the billions. But the idea is, how do we use our limited funding, because it is finite, because it comes from public sources, in a catalytic way to bring a lot more of that private sector capital or even public sector if needed. So looking forward to strengthening this and also engaging in the conversation with the CEOs of the partners. So thank you, Vikram. Thank you, Remy. And on behalf of the Green Climate Fund, Yannick and myself, we're very pleased to strengthen our partnership.
Hello? Only have one. Sorry, you guys go ahead. I'll get out of the way. Wonderful. Congratulations to IDFC and GCF. Please. Can I request the CEOs, please, to stay and. Lovely. Thank you. Hello? You only have one. Sorry about that. Bye, Remy. I think we may have done a Jimi Hendrix already, but never mind. It is my pleasure now to introduce to you a distinguished panel of CEOs from development banks around the world. I'll start to keep it. Wait. I'll start with you, sir. Mr. Somalia Zubairu is AFC's president and chief executive officer since 2018. AFC is a pan-African multilateral development institution which was created to provide project development expertise and risk capital to address Africa's growing infrastructure need. I already introduced Henry, Deputy CEO of GCF. I won't go there again. Next to Henry is Javier Diaz, who's the CEO of Bancoldex, the Bank of Foreign Trade that operates as Colombia's entrepreneurial development and export-import bank, providing long and short-term financing as well as specialized product to support Colombian exports. And finally, to my immediate left is Patrick Lamini, who is DBSA's executive director for the last 10 years. And DBSA is a government-owned development finance institution established about, 40 years ago nearly. And with the mandate to promote economic growth as well as regional integration for sustainable development. And we are going to have a conversation. I'm going to start out with asking each of you a question. The shorter you keep it, the more your responses, the more time we'll have to sort of have a discussion, which I think would be very interesting to have all four of you sort of engage on that. So let me start with you, Patrick. You just happen to be right left of me, so I'm going to start with you. In their remarks earlier, there was a lot of reference, of course, to the work that I know DBSA has done and is one of the entities that has also accessed GCF money. So where do you think, what has been, from your perspective, helped DBSA shift and do the transition, being part of member of the IDFC as well as accessing the GCF?
Thank you, Vikram. Good morning, everyone, and good morning to my fellow panelists. Good to see you, Henry, and really, Somalia and Javier. Thank you very much. It's a privilege to share this platform with you. Really, for us as DBSA, I think the fact that we are members of IDFC meant that we could be able to share quite a lot of lessons and learn a lot from each other in terms of what is it that we want to do collectively as global citizens and more so as DFIs, because we are institutions that are about economic development. And how then do we make sure that we are able to use the collective power that we derive from being IDFC members to make sure that we embrace our global partnership. And GCF is so central into our transition into green economy. So for us, we really engaged quite deeply amongst ourselves, and the need for us to make sure that we really take a lead in ensuring that we achieve accreditation by GCF and make sure that we are able to then collectively work with our partners to drive the transition of our economy into green economy. It's not easy coming from a developing world, but it is something that with global partners can become quite scalable and can become quite doable, because you know that you are not alone. We are a nation with a lot of endowment in fossil fuel, and therefore trying to shift away can be quite a political challenge. But when we are able to demonstrate benefits and the need for us to really make sure that we are able to shift with the support of the developed world partners, it then becomes something that you can be able to sell and engage your political principle and civil society, because they really are very much ahead of many of us. So that engagement and the coalition of the willing becomes absolutely critical. So for us, that was very critical. And really, we have been able to access just over 200 million US dollars from GCF. And really, we are moving with speed, and we are happy that our international partners are really with us, and hence traversing that road becomes quite key, because the transition says just is absolutely critical in the just transition. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Patrick. I think I'm going to come back to you after everybody's had an opportunity to speak. So we'll hold that thought that you ended with about the just transition. Javier, if I could turn to you, you're at the sort of other spectrum, not quite the other spectrum, at least you're engaging with the GCF to get accredited at this point. That obviously has a pot of gold at the end, or at least a idea that along the lines that Patrick outlined, that you'll be able to access money, but it also has its challenges, I'm sure, in terms of getting through the accreditation process. Where are you with it, and what your thought? Could you reflect on the process for us? Thank you.
Thank you, Vikram. My name is Javier Diaz. I represent Bancoldex, Colombia's business development bank, and as Patrick was saying, it's a true honor to be sharing this panel with you today. So before I answer the question as to why we're doing the GCF accreditation and why it's so critical, let me use my few minutes to give a little bit of context as to what is going on in terms of funding projects right now. Over the past 12 months, projects have become much more expensive. At least in Colombia, the central bank intervention rate has been raised by 10%. Inflation is about maybe 11 or 12%. So we are talking about funding the projects, which we have, by the way. We have solar, we have wind, we have biomass. We have a tremendous amount of projects in Colombia that need to be funded. And we have been talking to sponsors over the past 12 or 18 months. But in the same period of time, debt has become so much more expensive. So when you consider that, and we have had to reprice our own funding costs and our own costs that we pass on to these projects, it's becoming harder. So as things become harder and we are required to do more as we have to, the GCF becomes much more critical. We've been working on the accreditation process for 4 years, which is a long time, but we'll get there. I'm positive we'll get there in 2023. But we have to do this in a realistic way. So if it was hard before, it's harder now, and we need cheaper funding. So concessional resources, technical assistance, all the good things that come from the GCF are going to be needed more right now than they ever were, because this is the counter-cyclical fashion in which we have to act. So more expensive funding means we have to get the concessional resources as quickly as we can out the door. So I think the partnership that is being emboldened today between GCF and IDFC is ever more welcome. So I just wanted to add that bit of color, because if we needed it before, we need it much more now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I'm going to come back to you on that whole cost of capital issue later. Somalia, you are a Pan-African DFI, and you issued a white paper where you laid out your own plan and strategy of how you see AFC supporting resilient infrastructure, obviously the industrialization, the infrastructure that was mentioned earlier, Finovate, which I thought was very interesting aspect of what you were planning to do. From what I understand, you are accredited but haven't accessed GCF funding yet. Where are you? What are your aspirations vis-a-vis this partnership? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks to Patrick for those remarks. I'm also glad to be on this panel. Thanks to Javier for your remarks around cost of funding. I agree with everything that you've all said. So I would not like to repeat all the points that you've raised. But I'd like to talk about, the African situation and the importance of GCF in helping us overcome the challenges, particularly the Finovate you just recently mentioned. So really for us in Africa, we have a lot of need. The infrastructure deficit is about 2.3 trillion. If you factor in the climate aspect of it and the need to climate-proof and build resilient infrastructure on the continent, you're talking about $3 trillion. Now, it is important to understand why that is the case, because while we are the least contributors to climate change, we suffer the most devastating effects of it. And because of the nature of our continent, its vast size, and the fact that we're very coastal, we really are at risk. We know that on average, about $35 billion worth of loss is suffered anytime we have severe climate events. Recently, we had this massive flood in Nigeria, where about 1.3 million people were displaced. So there's real need on the ground. And what we try to do is we try to focus on our core expertise of project development, which is how do we transform the ideas to bankable projects, and how can we work with our partners. So IDFC has been a very useful tool for us, because within that we have the likes of AFD, the likes of Green Climate Fund, DBSA, with whom we collaborate with on the continent. And what we do is we specifically do risk, and then we invite them to invest alongside us. So in that vein, we are looking at an application now with the Green Climate Fund for $240 million, within which we're going to build an infrastructure climate resilient fund. And the idea of that is to climate-proof physical infrastructure on the continent, with the idea being because we don't have most of the infrastructure, and because the infrastructure is yet to be built, this is a good part for you to make it resilient. So don't build it normally, since you know what you know about the adverse impacts of climate. Build infrastructure going forward, bearing in mind that they need to be resilient. And the resilient has a cost, which is higher, and we hope that working with Green Climate Fund, we can get the first loss tranche, upon which we will raise commercial capital on top. To your point about the power of leverage and the fact that whatever you give is what will be used to mobilize more capital. So we have done this, and we have worked with our partners like AFD. We've gotten funds from them in the past. We work with DBSA, and we have made investments in Africa's renewable energy programs. We are invested in a wind farm currently in Djibouti that will provide most of the energy requirements of the island. We are investing in a hydro dam in Cote d'Ivoire that will reduce tariffs and increase renewable energy stock in the country. We're invested in a wind farm in Cape Verde, provides most of the energy requirements of the island. We have recently acquired Lekela, which is the largest renewable energy asset on the continent. And the reason why we did that was because we see the potential for renewable energy in Africa. So Africa has 60% of the best solar sources, yet 1% is built. With an acquisition like that, we believe we can build renewable energy at scale, especially because one of the challenges we have is cost. projects are much more expensive. While over the long haul, renewable energy is cheaper, the acquisition cost is very high. And to able to manage those, we think that you need economies of scale. So when you have a platform like what we have just acquired, Lekela, it has about 1.4, it has 1 gigawatt now. Our pipeline is about our assets are about 400, so it's about 1.4, but we have a pipeline of about 2 gigawatts. And we think that the ability to execute at that scale is required going forward. We would need the likes of Green Climate Fund, again, to further support aspirations. And then if I look at why we haven't really accessed funds from Green Climate Fund, even though they had approved 100 million in the past, is because of the local regulatory environment and their inability to provide the payment support and the payment mechanism required for projects to be bankable. There again, we will need help, because it's not that they don't want to do it, they just don't have the capacity to do it. They know that once they do those projects, it will reduce the cost of electricity over time. But it is the credit enhancement that enables them to do it that is a challenge. There again, we think a dialogue with Green Climate Fund about how we could support local utilities, put in place frameworks that allow banks to be comfortable and give them the letters of credit that they can provide to the utility companies or bulk traders in those markets is very useful. So to your point, Green Climate Fund is becoming ever more critical for the energy transition, especially in Africa, where we need them not just for the funding, but for also technical expertise and also providing support to institutions that will make the green energy transition possible.
That's wonderful. So the three CEOs have made my life as a moderator quite easy. And by the way, you can tell the moderator is the person who doesn't wear the tie, right? So it's part of the privilege of being one. So we heard, if I can just pick headlines from the three of them, just transition, the need for getting that done, delivering a reasonable cost of capital so that projects on the ground can get done, and resilience built into infrastructure. By the way, I need to introduce you to the Coalition for Climate Resilient Investment, where they are looking at it from a private sector profitable perspective. So, Henry, the tough question goes to you. Given what we have heard, given the ambitious replenishment that GCF is hoping for, where do you think you could work with IDFC members, such as the three co-panelists, in helping deliver what their needs are? What could you sort of say to that? With not putting you on the spot. I mean, and this is not a GCF commitment, we realize that, but yeah.
You already did my disclaimer, so thank you for that. No, I think, first of all, thanks to the three partners and CEOs, because I think what we are not only building in the future, but what we've also done has also informed a lot on how GCF could be a better partner. We are a learning organization. We've only been in operations for 7 years. We now have 209 projects approved for $11.2 billion of commitments, that if we include co-financing, our portfolio goes to $42 billion. So even though it's a bit of a startup, it's not such a bad record, even though there are lessons learned and things to improve. On the just transition, I think we've already worked and we continue to work, and I think the accreditation of the BSA opened a lot of debate around the importance of net zero and the importance of providing this right partnership. I think the most important thing is what is the catalyzer needed from us that would allow our partners to really make things happen. Because while the concessionality is an important element, as Javier was pointing to, the additionality is even more important. Meaning, what others are not able to do that we are able to do. And I have to say that we are maybe privileged because we have a lot of flexibility in using any kind of instrument in our toolkit to make it happen. We don't have thresholds that you have to have up to X amount in equity or up to X amount in grant. No, for us, we have finite resources.
So that's the issue. The issue is how much money we have, but it's not what instrument to use. So in our conversations for just transition, for climate infrastructure, or for food and value chain, what we want to make sure is that we come to de-risk or align the risks at the right place and with the right size. In the past, we were able to do very large ticket sizes of 200, 300. I think going forward, we might need to be a lot more careful in the sense of right sizing, because the demand is increasing. As our entities increase, more demand comes to us. And the other element is that some of the DFIs that are members of IDFC, they could also come and co-invest with us at the same level. In the past, we've been the ones providing the junior capital, but there are certain players that should also be able to provide co-financing with us at that tranche in pari passu terms, if they have blended finance windows, if they have other philanthropic facilities as well. So this is something that I think it is really important. Now, we also want to emphasize the need of using different instruments. And I think with AFC, we're trying to work on an equity structure. With DBSA, we've discussed working on guarantees. We really want to start working more on those instruments. I think senior loans was sort of the low-hanging fruit, and that's what we did in the first vintage. As we go now to the future, we want to do more innovative financial instruments. It could be, green bonds, guarantees. It could also be impact-linked bonds. I mean, there are many other things being developed that I think we hopefully will be able to provide with that. But I think this is an aggregator. For us, working with the banks is a way of aggregating capital and moving the quantum forward. Thank you.
That's great. So we are nearly out of time, but I think we have enough time to go at least back to the three CEOs with one question. Just parsing everything that was said. And by the way, Henry, there's a lot of demand, but one way that can be fixed is if the donor countries step up and provide the supply, right? So hopefully that'll happen. But to the three CEOs, okay, let's say the quantum is lower, GCF. And this is not on behalf of GCF, this is a hypothetical question to the three of you. If you had $100 million from GCF, you were told as long as you met the broader parameters, you could use this as you like. Can I ask you to reflect for 15 seconds each and tell us how would your bank want to deploy the $100 million in flexible concessional capital that the GCF provides? You want to go first, Patrick? You're ready? Perfect. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Absolutely. Thank you, Vikram. Really, I think that will definitely be quite useful if we were to deploy this limited precious capital on project preparation and feasibility studies, because that is where the sweet spots of creating investable and bankable project lies, where you then can be able to really crystallize the structure and also make sure who must play what role, because that then creates a floodgate for investors to come in. That would be my prioritization area if I were to have that, because I think it will make that impact much more bigger.
Perfect. It can't be the same answer.
$100 million of GCF money in Colombia can leverage 5 to 7x the amount of debt. And I think with a guarantee from MIGA, which we have used in the past, we can leverage between $500 million to $1 billion of debt projects. Thank you.
I would appeal for more than 100 million. Because, because really we're working with 54 African countries, with all significant needs. And I just told you that we need $3 trillion for infrastructure. So I would use the 240 million that I'm expecting from you for the Infrastructure Climate Resilience Fund and the additional 100 million, for equity as well. so that I can leverage more money. We have built the first carbon neutral industrial zone in the world, certified by SGS, and is the first in Africa. We think we need to build several more of that. And if we walk along this path, we will achieve the just transition and the green energy transition. Thank you.
Vikram, could I be a hypothetical CEO asking GCF money? Is that possible? If I had that 100 million and I was sitting in their chairs, I will ask to create a local currency facility in order to make sure that we're not putting into our end users the FX risk. So that would be something our board wants to do a pilot. We've discussed it with the BSA. There's always been issues, but I believe we need to really also create those local currency facilities because I think that would unlock a lot more.
We actually have done that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. You heard it here. It's the insider track to accessing GCF. And with that, I think we're out of time. I would like to thank all four of you for an absolutely excellent and engaging discussion. If you'll give them a hand, please.